I don't know that I've ever noticed in that song before a time to refrain from embracing. Hmm. And yet here we are in this very odd time to refrain from embracing. So thank you for choosing to be part of this spiritual community today. A special thank you and happy Mother's Day to all the biological mothers in this virtual room, all the stepmoms in this room, all those who wanted to be mothers and couldn't be or didn't for various reasons, and all those who nurtured others, regardless of their biological relationship to the ones that they cared for, regardless of how well you think you did with those you nurtured. You are all amazing. I don't have any children of my own, but I have several biological and chosen nieces and nephews that I support and nurture to the best of my ability. Imagine my surprise this week. I was having a tough time one day, and one of my chosen nephews messaged me about something. And when I didn't respond with the level of enthusiasm he expected, he was insightful enough to ask me what was going on. And I had the awareness to share with him what was troubling me. And so briefly, for just a moment, the tables were turned and he nurtured me. Once we do get to adulthood, it can quit being a one-way street. And that's an amazing and fabulous experience when we let ourselves have it. So today I want to focus a lot of today's talk on a book that Pat Masters facilitated in a book study 14 or 15 months ago. It was David Rico's book, 5 Things We Cannot Change and the Happiness We Find by Embracing Them. David is a longtime Buddhist, a psychotherapist, and really a very good writer. The 5 unchangeable or unavoidable things that he writes the book about are: everything changes and ends. Things do not always go according to plan. Life is not always fair. Pain is a part of life, and people are not loving and loyal all the time. I think most of us would agree, at least at some level, that these are true statements, that though they are not necessarily the truth of our being. We are always at liberty to reframe our experiences and see them in new ways. And there are times this seems quite challenging. I could very easily go off on a riff about the virus at this point and talk about how the virus has presented us all with each of these 5 unchangeable, unavoidable things to one degree or another. I doubt there is anyone present today or who may watch this talk in the future who can honestly say they were completely unaffected by the sudden, unexpected, and drastic changes that the presence of this virus has created, or the stories that have been created around it, or the actions that individual humans or collective groups of humanity have taken or not taken in reaction or response to it. We've never done a pandemic before, when we've been so connected and perversely required to stay separated. Normal human reactions are to band together in difficult times to manage and deal with the troubles. And so we're being required to do this in new ways. And at times, it feels very contradictory to our familiar ways we would choose to be. And further, some decisions and actions we take and actions that others take have seemed life-affirming and uplifting, and some have seemed or felt entirely the opposite. What I want to focus on here is our decision and our reaction or response to our present experience, especially since we automatically compare our experiences to our personal rule books in our heads about how things ought to be. It's the comparison to the ideal scenarios in our minds, our recreated, replayed, or reconstructed memories that get us in the most trouble, especially when things don't turn out the way we want or compare favorably with that mental model in our heads, especially when we feel unacknowledged, unseen or unheard, rejected or ignored. What I want to encourage you to do today is to look at the stories you have of your early childhood and the nurturance or lack thereof that you found there, and see if you can discover some new awareness about the ways your upbringing has influenced you to show up in the world today. And if you don't like what you see, here's a chance to recreate it a new way. In David Rico's book, he wrote, "It is perfectly natural to feel hurt, since we are made of penetrable stuff. Our work as healthy psychological adults is to feel the hurt rather than run from it. Our practice as spiritually mature beings is to feel the hurt without having to retaliate. If we feel the hurt more intensely or for longer, and no one can determine this but us, then we deem as appropriate, then there is something we can do. David says, we can look at our face in the mirror. And he has made an acronym. David has made an acronym out of the word face. F stands for fear. I am afraid I will not survive if everyone does not love me. And this is how I am a source of suffering for myself. A, attachment. I am attached to a very specific version of what I am owed. And this is how I am a source of suffering to myself. C, control. I need to control others' reactions to me. And this is how I am a source of suffering to myself. And lastly, E, entitlement. I believe I am entitled to love and loyalty from everyone and insist on it. And this is how I am a source of suffering to myself. When he says it that way, so blunt and in your face, about how irrational our need is, it's almost embarrassing. And when we look at the stories we tell ourselves about our upbringing, and many of us have similar unexplored expectations, or at least close enough, those stories, they can rise up and bite us in the most unexpected moments. And this is not to diminish or dismiss early childhood traumas. They can be very real experiences and have long-lasting impacts if they have not been dealt with. According to the Center for Child Trauma Assessment Services and Interventions website, approximately 65% of children experience at least one major adverse event during their childhood, and nearly 40% experience at least two. There are 10 categories of childhood traumas that they list, ranging from all forms of abuse and neglect, violence or threat of violence, or even seeing violence, mental illness, parental separation, divorce, death, or incarceration. So, trauma is real, but we don't need to spend our whole lives living from our history, repeating our history, or pushing against it so that it doesn't overtake us again. We have a different way we can respond to our environment, a different way we can reframe it, a different way we can see it and act from it. This is one of the major things I love about this teaching. We acknowledge the experiences that we have in life, no matter what they were. However, we do not put those experiences up on a pedestal and worship them and say they are the reason we are the way we are. Dr. Holmes wrote in The Science of Mind, page 267, "No man can demonstrate peace while clinging to unhappiness. He can demonstrate resignation and call it peace, but it will not be peace. No man can jump in the water and remain dry. This is contrary to law and to reason. Here he switches to capital letters. I like to think he's yelling to make a point. No person whose entire time is spent in the contemplation of limitation can demonstrate freedom from such limitation. Let me read that again. No person whose entire time is spent in the contemplation of limitation can demonstrate freedom from such limitation. If we focus on being stuck, we can't ever be free from being stuck. Instead, we get to take a hard look at our past experiences, what actually happened, reframe them, look at them with new eyes, and decide a way they can be useful to us and not have power over us or control over us in the present time. They are informational. They are things that happened. And now they're useful for reference only. They indicate what used to be true or what we believed was true and what is no longer true about us. It doesn't matter how many times or how many ways or how often we get to revisit these topics. We keep doing it as long as it takes because we are the only ones that get to decide whether we're free or bound. And it's by our decisions and our choices. And when we have affirmed our current reality that supports our aliveness enough times that we actually believe it, we can then look at our history and refer to it even, and see our memories of our history and put that historical experience in some perspective. And then we're able to look at it more kindly through the lens of time and explore it for the gifts it brought. So I made a note when I was working on this talk yesterday to put a personal story here. And I had one all picked out until I talked to my sister this morning. And she said, "Do you remember how Mama made baked beans?" And I said, no. She said, "Well, my daughter Rachel wants the recipe." And I told her I was sure you'd know because you had made it more recently. And I'm thinking, yeah, 15 years ago I made it. And so together we pieced the recipe together, pieced it together, and I think we got pretty close. But what that recipe represented wasn't, the beans in the 13 by 9 pan that were very sweet and very yummy. It was every time they were made, it was a party. Every time those showed up on the table, we were celebrating something. And it usually was a cookout, and it usually was a gathering, and it usually was something fabulous and delightful and uplifting. So the story of the baked beans wasn't the recipe. It wasn't, the calories and the bacon and the hamburger and the mustard and the, whatever was in it. It was the memory of those social, familial, joyful times where we got together and celebrated something. And it might have been 4th of July, it might have been Memorial Day, it might have been, who knows, spring break, something. So we get to see those memories, we get to see those experiences, and we get to look at them with new eyes. And we get to do this every single time. And until we're able to see our memories from an uplifting and supportive way, we have work to do. And that's okay. I mean, it's good work when we can get it. In the Beverly Hills Lectures on page 49, Dr. Holmes told this anecdote. And Beverly Hills Lectures were transcripts of lectures that he gave rather than written documents that he worked on. So he's telling this story. "I've been treating a very tough case of arthritis because the guy was mean. He didn't know he was mean. There are certain emotional reasons why he was mean, and I didn't treat his arthritis at all. I treated to know that there was a flexibility, a generosity, a spirit of love and tolerance and understanding, and that there is nothing that can settle where it doesn't belong. Everything is liquid. Everything is fluid. Why shouldn't the power that put the thing there take it away? So our beloved Louise Hay, who was actually a religious science minister, although she didn't say it much, wrote in her book, Heal Your Body A to Z, she was writing about the probable mental cause of arthritis. She wrote, it was feeling unloved, criticized, critical, or filled with resentment. And the antidote was to have a new thought pattern, to create a new thought pattern, to affirm a new idea. The new idea, I am love. I now choose to love and approve of myself. I see others with love. Because until we see ourselves with love and approve of ourselves and love ourselves, then we can't actually move to the place of being able to see and approve others. And so we end up feeling unloved and criticized and critical and filled with resentment, and we end up with creaky joints. And everything is fluid, so that's changeable. So how could this possibly be true, this stuff that I'm saying? I mean, we're talking about real things that happen to real people. There's a scene in Shakespeare's Hamlet that will be familiar to many of you. Hamlet says, "What's news?" Rosencrantz says, "None, my lord, but the world is growing honest." Hamlet said, "Well, then doomsday is near, but your news is not true. Let me question more in particular. What have you, my good friends, done to deserve at the hand of fortune that she sends you to prison here?" Old English is tough. Guildenstern says, "Prison, my lord?" Hamlet said, "Denmark's a prison." Rosencrantz says, "Well, then the world is one." Hamlet says, "A goodly one, in which there are many confines, wards, and dungeons. Denmark is one of the worst." Rosencrantz says, "We don't think so, my lord." Hamlet said, "Why then it is none for you, for is nothing either good nor bad, but thinking makes it so. To me, Denmark is a prison." Hamlet found himself stuck because his dreams and his expectations didn't match his experience of reality. So our thinking makes our prison, and adjusting or modifying our thinking is the only way out of our self-created prison. I posted this short poem this morning on our Facebook page that will be familiar to many of you. Daniel Ladinsky wrote it. He says he wrote his poetry in the style of Hafiz after dreaming about being with Hafiz. And you know this one. The small man builds cages for everyone he knows, while the sage, who has to duck his head when the moon is low, keeps dropping keys all night long for the beautiful rowdy prisoners. We are all four, the small man, the prisoners, the guards, and the sage, and we have the key, which are our continuous decisions of how to view our past and our present, and tell ourselves and others of our past experiences and our present. So I want to circle back to David Richo and his antidote to face fear, attachment, need to control, and entitlement. He offers a series of affirmations that are worth considering. 1, I let go of fear by showing more love and finding excitement in life's challenges. 2, I let go of attachment to my version of how others should act, and I accept the given of life that not everyone will be loving, truthful, honest, caring, or loyal to me all the time. 3. I let go of control and let others love or dislike me as they choose. 4. I let go of my insistence that I be loved and respected by everyone. I choose to focus instead on being loving and respectful toward everyone I meet. This is what matters to me now. And lastly, and this made me laugh, I recognize I am also not loving and loyal all the time, and I am working on that. Words of truth there. We live in this time-space opportunity, and we get to choose how we remember our childhood days and how we choose to reenact them or love from a greater awareness of those experiences. And we get to decide how to remember and consider those adults from our past who may or may not have loved us in exactly the way we wanted to be loved. Probably they didn't. We get to honor and appreciate them for doing the best they knew how, given their own history, their own awareness, and their own upbringing. As Maya Angelou wrote, do the best you can until you know better. Then when you know better, do better. And I would turn this on myself and make it more personal. I did the best I could until I knew better. And when I knew better, I did better. And so do you, and so did they. Some would argue that people should know better, but if they don't do better, then maybe they don't actually know better. To repeat 2 of David Rico's affirmations, I let go of attachment to my version of how others should act, and I accept the given of life that not everyone will be loving, truthful, honest, caring, or loyal to me all the time. And I recognize I am also not loving and loyal all the time, and I am working on that. So in closing, I want to read 2 things. One, from yesterday morning's daily practice, Ernest Holmes and Raymond Charles Barker's 365 Days of Richer Living. I know that all the power there is, and all the presence there is love, the living Spirit Almighty. I know that love is divine protection, and I know that I am governed, guided, and guarded into the pathways of peace, joy, and security. I know that this is true of all people. This is what I believe about everyone. This is what exists for the whole world. This is my prayer of acceptance today and every day. I feel myself safe in the keeping of divine love and infinite power. I feel the soft, enveloping presence of the living Spirit. And then a short piece by Rabbi Rami Shapiro. The title is Unending Love. We are loved by an unending love. We are embraced by arms that find us, even when we are hidden from ourselves. We are touched by fingers that soothe us, even when we are too proud for soothing. We are counseled by voices that guide us, even when we are too embittered to hear. We are loved by an unending love. We are supported by hands that uplift us, even in the midst of a fall. We are urged on by eyes that meet us, even when we are too weak for meeting. We are loved by an unending love. Embraced, touched, soothed, counseled. Ours are the arms, the fingers, the voices. Ours are the hands, the eyes, the smiles. We are loved by an unending love. Remember that you are love, walking around on 2 legs, seeing with 2 eyes. Bless yourself and bless us all. Thank you. So now it's time for our community prayer. So grab a hold of some memory that doesn't feel loving to you at this moment and embrace it in your own loving arms and watch it blossom into something that supports you and your life in this day while I speak the words. Infinite radiant love that lives as me. I know the truth of this because I know divine love, infinite radiant love, whole and holy love lives as all of life. It shows up in all forms as all beings, and it moves. It moves as the sun rises, it moves as the hearts beat, it moves as the flowers blossom, it moves as the seeds grow and the fruits set. It moves on 2 legs and 4 and 8 and many. It slithers along. All of life is moved by love. I know this truth for myself and for every single being of sound and light on this call, or that may hear this talk later, and those that never do. All beings live as love to the best of their understanding, and each is given the gift to see more and become more loving, more whole, more holy, more conscious, more aware, more enlightened, more present to the good that lives as life now. So I breathe in that idea and let it fill my cells. Let it fill me up to overflowing. And I let the good leak out and spill over everyone I meet. And I know each does the same. In great love and joy, I bless us all. And so it is.
So it is.